I don't understand how arrogant a person can be who comes after 11 years of marriage and says he will sleep with another. I realized that I didn't know my wife at all. It seemed to me that I knew absolutely everything about her. But as it turned out, I didn't know anything about her, and she lied to me all the time. I arrived home later than planned that night. I had to attend a meeting that I didn't particularly want to be a part of. The two individuals I was mediating between were frankly unpleasant. Both seemed intent on causing as much harm to each other as possible, rather than seeking resolution. They weren't interested in finding common ground. Their focus was on inflicting damage. I understood why. They viewed the situation as a business disaster. However, it was my responsibility to find a compromise where both sides could leave feeling satisfied. Achieving this was nearly impossible when one or both parties were more focused on hurting the other rather than resolving the issue. Sometimes attempting to resolve things only added to the pain. In such cases, no one walked away feeling content. There have been times when I've had to admit defeat and advise both parties that legal intervention was necessary because the only resolution they sought was to cause harm to the other. In situations where both sides are driven by anger and pain, there remains hope that one or both will eventually reconsider their approach. This is where my role becomes crucial. I suppose it's customary to introduce myself. I'm Mike Absalom. I work as a mediator, and if I may say so, a rather effective one. Our company is hired by legal firms as arbitrators. Typically, our role is embedded within contracts. When a contract dispute arises, instead of immediately resorting to lawyers, the involved parties, sometimes 2, 3, or even 4, turn to us. We sit down, strive to grasp the situation and each party's desires, and endeavor to reach an agreement. Sometimes we succeed, sometimes we don't. Our work isn't legally binding. We negotiate agreements based on goodwill rather than enforceable law. Occasionally, our agreements are formalized into contracts, but primarily, we aim to facilitate dialogue and resolution. It's less about strict legal interpretation and more about fostering mutual understanding and cooperation. Yeah, that's what I do. It's been a constant in my life, always finding ways to mediate. Growing up in a big family, 6 kids, 5 boys, and 1 girl, I was the second eldest, often playing the role of peacemaker. Our mom raised us alone. Our dad passed away shortly after the youngest, Benji, was born. It was a tragic accident involving a drunk driver while he was crossing the road, just after buying flowers for Mom. She never fully recovered from the loss, but she poured herself into providing for us. Even with both parents providing equally for 6 children, roof, clothes, food, and attention would have been challenging. For one parent, it was a monumental task. Mom worked in real estate, and we became what they called latchkey kids. Coming home to fend for ourselves, watching TV, and inevitably getting on each other's nerves, with me usually ending up as the mediator. Mediation eventually became my career path. It wasn't something I planned. It simply evolved. I started out on the shop floor of a factory, crafting metal widgets for various products like golf carts and pens. You name it. If it needed small metal parts, we made them. To cut a long story short, I found myself frequently being the voice of reason in disputes, and I naturally ended up resolving conflicts when necessary. I'm not sure why they chose me. Perhaps I just seemed the most level-headed. So I was working at this metal shop, a part-time gig, while I was studying creative writing at college. Yeah, not sure what I was thinking either. There was a conflict between management and workers. Some of us were unionized, some weren't. I wasn't in the union, but somehow ended up as the workers' representative. There was a union rep who showed up occasionally, but half the time management wanted to talk to the workers. He was nowhere to be found. Part of me still thinks management did that on purpose. Anyway, I ended up doing a lot of the talking, and despite management being prepared for a fight, we managed to negotiate something. It happened again 4 months later. Similar situation. They didn't want us taking vacation in August due to a big order or something. This time they brought in an arbitration company, essentially doing what I had done, but supposedly without bias, according to management. It didn't really change much. The arbitration company ended up consulting with me and the union rep anyway, then passing the decision to management. They acted more like a middleman. We sorted out a solution that avoided any unpleasantness, as management put it, and everyone benefited, especially me. I even got a job offer from the arbitration company. So I switched my college major to business studies with a minor in psychology and joined them instead. Definitely easier on my hands, that's for sure. I graduated 2 years later and have been working as a mediator ever since. Let me tell you, I've handled some unusual cases, from disputes between movie companies and actors' agents, to conflicts within car companies involving their workers, and even between lawyers who are partners. I've mediated between competitors in a surfing competition and the organizing company, and I've facilitated more than a few marriages. I don't attempt to play the role of a marriage counselor, I leave that to the experts. My job starts when all else has failed and the only thing left to sort out is who gets the CD collection. I have my own unique approach that works for me. I find that people respond to vulnerability and honesty. During mediation, I make it a point to show my vulnerability and honesty. I sit down with each party separately to understand who they are, what they value, how they perceive the situation, what they hope to achieve, and their views on the other side. Essentially, I try to grasp the perspectives of both sides in the conflict. I want to mention that I've been reprimanded by senior partners multiple times for using that language, but it's how I initially approach understanding clients, and it works for me. I just need to refrain from using those words. From that starting point, I typically find a way to encourage each side to consider what the other finds significant. It might not matter to one side, or it might, and that's what's causing the conflict. In any case, helping them recognize each other's needs is crucial. Orson Scott. Card, a well-known science fiction writer and somewhat religiously inclined, once wrote a story about a girl who could see the connections between people. She perceived them as lines of force that formed a web connecting everyone. She knew how to sever those lines with a few well-chosen words. On a different note, how is it that some people can be incredibly intelligent and craft amazing stories with compelling characters and dialogue, yet have this profound blind spot where they believe in invisible beings residing above the clouds? It baffles me. When I read his story, I noticed similarities between what I do and what this fictional character does. I don't always immediately see what unites people, but with enough effort I can usually figure it out. My job is either to destroy existing connections or to create new ones that replace the old ones. At least that's how I see it. It's all a little touching, and it's not easy for me to convey it. And this is definitely not a skill that I practice at home with my wife. Oh yes, my wife. I haven't even mentioned her yet. But I needed to tell you a little bit about what I do and how I do it, because later it will make a difference. Do I really need to describe myself? Seriously. Okay. I'm exactly 6 feet tall. I weigh 197 pounds at least a week ago. I drink vodka, I love wine, I ride a bike to train, and yes, my hair is starting to thin out and definitely graying on the sides. Damn old age. Is that enough? Should I continue like this? Or be clean-shaven or something like that? Does anyone really care about this? So, about my wife. Yes, I have to talk about her. She's the love of my life. I know everyone says that, right? But it's true. It's like one of those things that people say about having children, how amazing it is. These are just words for those who haven't experienced it. I find it quite intriguing and somewhat funny how people announce that they are going to have children. The words, "we are pregnant," really make me smile. Are we? I just have a good time, and besides, it's totally her show. She grows them out, suffers discomfort, stops drinking, and eventually faces humiliation during childbirth. not to mention potential problems such as stretch marks and postpartum depression. And yet, somehow, the guy is handing out cigars. Yes, this is a real contribution. And there are also tips from friends. Go get drunk. You won't be able to when the baby is born. Go to the cinema. You won't be able to when the baby is born. Go out to eat. You won't be able to when the baby is born. Go get some sleep. You won't be able to sleep when the baby is born. And my favorite, engage in intimacy. You won't be able to do that when the baby is born. And they always end with the words, but it's going to be the best thing ever. Of course, it looks like it. It sounds fantastic. I mean, so many people say that, they must really mean it. But damn it, they explain to you in detail why it's going to be hard. And then they say, but it's great. It's the best thing that's ever happened, without going into details. But considering how I felt, past tense, about Christy, I completely understand it. That's her name, by the way. She used to be Christy Fenton, and now she's Christy Absalom, at least for the next couple of months anyway. My feelings for Christy were reciprocated. When it came to children, I knew my casual remarks about it came from a place of genuine concern. For us, the idea of having kids was out of the question. Christy had endured severe pain and what she called women issues since her first period. Her parents had rushed her to the hospital where they discovered her fallopian tubes were malformed. Surgery was necessary to tie them and remove the affected parts to prevent serious health risks. It was explained to her as a potential precursor to cancer. So her tubes were removed, along with any chance of Christy becoming pregnant. By the time we got together, she'd come to terms with it as much as one can. I've heard it said that a woman doesn't truly feel like a woman if she can't fulfill such a basic aspect of femininity. I'm not sure I agree, but I knew it was a sensitive subject for Christy, one neither of us wanted to delve into deeply. I accepted it. I adored children and always assumed I would have them someday, but when it came down to choosing between having Christy in my life or having children, the decision was obvious. We discussed this a lot, and a few years ago, Christy even suggested resorting to a surrogate pregnancy. We investigated this, I was tested, and we began to explore options and procedures for surrogacy. Despite Christy's enthusiasm, I always had doubts. I felt that something was wrong. When the right moment came, I couldn't finish the job. It wasn't until Christy was upset about my rejection that I realized why. Christy had been carrying deep unfounded guilt about her inability to conceive, viewing surrogacy as a way to fulfill my happiness and as a perceived penance from a higher power. I couldn't comprehend where this came from, but it took therapy to uncover and begin to mend these issues. Sometimes your instincts know more than your conscious thoughts. While they were accurate then, they failed me in a profound way this time. So we never had children. We never went through with adoption. It just didn't feel right, though I couldn't tell you exactly why. Instead, we decided that if we were going to be childless, we would embrace it fully. We traveled extensively, exploring the world, running with the bulls, having breakfast at the foot of the pyramids, playing hide-and-seek among the ruins of Pompeii, diving in Pearl Harbor, indulging in weeks of wine tasting in Napa Valley, and bungee jumping off the Sydney Harbor Bridge. We truly lived life to the fullest. Our lifelong friends gradually drifted away as they started families. Our lifestyles diverged, and we all understood why. There were many promises to get together, and initially we tried to keep them. But no one was ever available. And they couldn't find babysitters, and even when they could, they had to be home early and couldn't let loose, knowing they had parental responsibilities. After they left our downtown condo in Bellevue, a well-to-do suburb of Seattle, we would exchange knowing glances and giggle, saying to each other, "Thank goodness we don't have kids." It was somewhat pathetic, perhaps masking our own insecurities, but fueled by alcohol, we would then make love slowly and lazily on the balcony. Being 3 stories up, we weren't worried about being seen, so there were certainly some advantages. We were doing well. I had my job, which could get intense at times, and she had hers as a curator at a technology museum in Seattle. It was amusing. She had a passion for all the latest gadgets like iPhones, iPads, and Fitbits, things typically associated with being a guy thing, while I enjoyed classical music, sculpture, and opera. We often joked that our brains must have been swapped around like in that Star Trek episode, original series, of course. I've been properly educated on that by my occasionally nerdy wife. Don't worry. We've been married nearly 12 years now. We actually met at a lawn hockey game, of all places. I had just moved to the Seattle area after college in Missouri, and before that, growing up in the suburbs of Chicago. I didn't know many people yet, so when a colleague invited me, I figured why not spend my Saturday there. It was two mixed gender teams going at it. The level of competitiveness was something to witness. It seemed like a perfect excuse for the women on both teams to give the men a run for their money and be cheered for it. Sometimes it was hard to tell who was who. Some of the women were so strong and athletic. I had just witnessed a man take a brutal hit to the shins with a hockey stick, splitting his shin guard and causing blood to spill everywhere. As I processed the scene, I became aware of someone standing beside me, holding a drink and observing the chaos in front of us. "Do you think he'll ever want to join a co-ed team again?" she asked, turning to look at me. I wouldn't blame him if he didn't. "Limping off the field isn't exactly a great way to end anything," I replied, feeling somewhat inadequate. She smiled at me, then glanced back at the man being assisted off the field by his teammates. "Oh, there are definitely ways to make it more enjoyable. Not like that, though." "Nice chatting with you," she nodded before walking away. For me, the encounter had been exhilarating. Christy, about 5'7" tall with brown hair streaked blonde, a round face, captivating eyes adorned with dark makeup and long eyelashes, which I later discovered were real, a perfectly upturned nose, stunning cheekbones, and a softly pouting mouth that invited kisses if you dared to linger on it. Her striking blue eyes blinked just a touch too frequently. She had a pleasing figure, nothing excessive, just the right proportions, with a well-shaped rear end that wasn't overly large or unsteady. Her hips were somewhat narrow, but she was an all-around delightful sight. As I watched her walk away, I couldn't help but lament my own lackluster responses, shaking my head with regret. Later that day, I had another chance when I visited the makeshift bar off the field. They were only serving inexpensive, mediocre wine, beer, and pre-made cocktails that tasted exactly as expected. I decided to settle for a glass of the least objectionable wine. Yes, I admit, I'm a bit of a wine snob. Thanks to my Aunt Nancy, who dabbled in wine reviews part-time, I had picked up quite a bit about terms like nose and bouquet, along with all the other pompous language used in wine critiques. Yet I also learned that much of it, about 95%, was just pretentious nonsense meant to impress others who didn't really know any better. Ultimately, wine, like art, boils down to personal taste. What works for you and what doesn't. There's nothing in the world that can justify a wine costing $100, let alone $1,000, except for how much someone is willing to pay for it. After choosing the only drink that didn't make me grimace, I turned around and found the charming individual who had spoken to me earlier in the day standing right behind me in line. She was deeply engrossed in manipulating a small black box that seemed to have a pen attached to it. She was so focused that she didn't notice me waiting patiently for her to realize and step aside. Finally, I cleared my throat to get her attention. She glanced up with a touch of annoyance, then realized the situation and apologized, saying, "Oh, sorry about that. I just got this and I can't seem to put it down." She held up the box, which featured a gray LCD screen. "It's a visor, one of the new PDAs," she explained as if that clarified everything. I simply nodded and she added, "Never mind. Sorry. Let me move out of your way." As she stepped aside, I maneuvered around her but then halted abruptly. She grabbed a drink, turned back around, and now I was blocking her path. She looked at me, a faint smile playing on her lips. "We keep running into each other. she remarked jokingly. I returned the smile. So what exactly is a visor? Let's step out of line and chat. And so we did. For an hour. I discovered that a visor was one of those new digital personal assistant devices, initially produced by Palm. I found out she was passionate about gadgets. I learned she was a trained librarian and historian. I found out she had only come that day because a friend was playing and she couldn't refuse without hurting his feelings. I also learned she was free next Friday and really wanted to see the latest Harry Potter movie, but didn't like going alone. The hint was clear, and I took it without hesitation. And that marked the beginning. By the 4th week, we were already in bed together, and within 10 months, we were married. Our wedding was quite chaotic. My entire family turned up, reminiscent of a Clampett reunion. Hers were also present, much more refined than ours, peering at us over their bifocals with suspicion, but eventually loosening up and joining the festivities when some of my relatives pulled them into the celebration. I could elaborate on her family. One sister, a brother in the army stationed who knows where, doing who knows what to who knows whom, and parents long divorced but now amicable. I didn't see her brother much as he was often abroad, but when we did meet, he seemed like a decent guy. He cared about his sister but wasn't blind to her quirks. We shared quite a few beers together, those army guys can really drink, and had some, well, let's say, interesting conversations. I ended up learning more about her past boyfriends than I ever wanted to know. I could continue on about our years together, growing, having fun, exploring life, and sometimes behaving like teenagers when we thought we could get away with it. We were partners in every sense of the word. We were part of several groups together. I read poetry while she made attempts to join in. She painted, and as for me, I honestly didn't even try. I could handle reading and writing, but that was about it. I didn't even know which end of a paintbrush to hold. I'd attempt abstracts, and she'd stroll over, take a look, and remark, "Looks like you're still in your 7-year-old phase," then burst into laughter. She found herself endlessly amusing my wife. We both owned top-of-the-line mountain bikes and used them extensively. The Seattle area is filled with bike trails, and we took full advantage of them. Cycling was our primary form of exercise, and we enjoyed it immensely. We even took biking trips to Portland and Vancouver. But let me be clear, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. We argued. We had our disagreements. She had a fiery temper. When she was really angry, you could feel the chill in the room. Her sarcasm was sharp and could hit deep, especially when she aired it out in front of others, leaving me torn between backing down and looking weak, or engaging in a heated argument in front of our friends. I tried both strategies, but neither seemed effective. Backing down sometimes diffused the situation faster, but made me appear weak in front of our friends. Standing up to her preserved my pride but often prolonged the conflict. She knew exactly what she was doing. It was strange because, to everyone else, she appeared delightful. Even when she strongly disliked some of the people in our social circle and could be quite cutting about them, she remained polite and exceedingly nice to their faces. Her vast displeasure was reserved solely for me whenever she felt the need. In a way, I felt immensely privileged that I was the only one she felt comfortable enough with to drop the facade. That's a compliment. On the other hand, I sometimes worried deeply about her mental well-being. But what really angered her more than anything was when I tried to use my damn Jedi mind tricks on her. Apparently, when I switched into what she called Mediator mode, I unconsciously assumed a specific posture and facial expression. She caught on early to what that meant, and no matter the topic of our argument, it was guaranteed to escalate things. Those were the moments when the inevitable taunts like, "Your family sucks too," would come out. Dragging family into any argument only makes things worse. She also learned quickly that bringing my mother into the argument was off limits. A weekend spent in a motel because I kicked her out drove that point home. To be fair, I should mention that she often had valid reasons for getting upset with me. I admit I'm not the easiest person to live with. I can be moody, quick to anger over trivial things. Never drive with me after a bad day. And I sometimes look down on people for being foolish, even though we all have our moments. Occasionally, I've even been known to visit clubs, despite understanding the exploitation of women they represent. I'm just as capable as she was of escalating a bad situation, though I preferred to resolve conflicts in private. She usually recognized when she had gone too far. After cooling down, she would apologize profusely, only for us to face similar issues again soon after. Our bed life was wonderful, at least in my opinion. We were perfectly matched in the bedroom, whether it was there in the living room or one memorable night in the back of a car in Victoria, Canada. We studied each other intimately, openly shared our fantasies, or at least I did. It turned out that she was not so outspoken. We took bold actions, for example. We went to dinner with her, and she was in a short dress unknowingly teasing strangers. We even played a game where I pretended to pick her up at a motel bar until an incident with a pushy guy made us change our minds. After that, I never did it again. As for her, who knows? I'm sorry for the expression. Sometimes life can overwhelm you, you know. Sometimes you're a windshield, sometimes you're a bug. Despite all this, we were happy. Or at least I believe that we were happy. I was certainly happy. My job could be difficult. I sometimes traveled on my company's projects. It wasn't often, and I always returned home soon. Christy also traveled occasionally on business for her museum, receiving donations from technology companies willing to donate old equipment for posterity. I accompanied her several times, although listening to the chatter of tech enthusiasts that a hard drive the size of a washing machine once cost $750,000 and now is inferior to earrings in capacity, was not quite in my idea of entertainment. But hey, I got to play golf in Arizona, in the middle of winter, all on Intel's tab, tried my luck with nickel slots, and had some intimate moments with my wife on hotel grounds, so why should I have cared? So, returning to that evening I mentioned, which is really what this story is about. I entered our condo, admiring its pleasant view, tossed my jacket on a chair and called out, "I'm home. What's for dinner?" The lights were on, indicating she was home. I'd parked beside her little Mazda Miata MX-5 convertible in the underground lot. The condo's entrance led right into the kitchen where I grabbed a beer, a low-calorie diet one as she liked to call it, and then wandered into the living room. And there she was, seated on the couch, knees together, looking up at me nervously, biting her lip. Yet it wasn't her that froze me in place. It was the man sitting beside her. "Honey," she murmured weakly. I just stood there staring, unable to believe my eyes. Her body language spoke volumes, contrite, upset, nervous, resolute, all in one posture. You can't live so intimately with someone for so many years and not recognize what you're witnessing. Well, apparently you can, as I was learning. But at that moment, I could discern the whole situation as clearly as daylight. The young man had a smile that hinted at non-confrontation, though not quite a sneer, but something similar. It seemed like he was trying to mask his classic arrogance with a facade of sensitivity. Whether he genuinely believed it or not, his body language unmistakably asserted his dominance and ownership over her in the events that followed. She was leaning forward on the couch, while he leaned back with both arms spread out, one behind her. It was clear she leaned forward to avoid the appearance of his arm around her, yet she hadn't removed it either. Her efforts to downplay the situation ironically made it look worse, leaving her seeming guilty rather than remorseful. Just observing them, I understood part of the situation. I knew what had transpired before. What I didn't know was their intentions moving forward, whether it was a confession and a promise not to repeat, a breakup moment, or something else. But I was aware of what had happened previously. Such things are hard to miss when you witness them. I glanced at them a moment longer before slumping into the chair next to the couch, positioned at a right angle to it. This placed me right beside the guy who eyed me with what I'm sure he believed was concern. I could see Christie's disapproving frown as I sat down, and I could decipher the thoughts crossing her face. Our seating arrangement was really poorly chosen. If I were to become aggressive, she wouldn't stand a chance at stopping me. But it was too late for that now. Clearly, there was a predetermined script they were adhering to, and I had to suppress the anger churning in my stomach to figure out what that script entailed. I cracked open a beer, took a deep sigh, and had a long sip. She nervously bit her lip on the verge of saying something, but hesitated. I guessed it would have been something like, "Yes, a beer sounds good right about now." A chuckle escaped me as a thought struck me. It's amusing how people react under sudden extreme stress like this. I've witnessed it before, and it always perplexed me. People say the most absurd things, make irrelevant remarks, or bring up points completely unrelated to the situation at hand. In my line of work, it's quite common, and I've often wondered silently what goes through their minds at that exact moment. Presumably a total denial of the reality of the situation, and here I was experiencing it myself. "What?" Christy asked, a hint of irritation in her voice that she quickly masked. I took another sip of beer and mused aloud. "You know, I thought I knew you so well. I can usually read your body language like a book, but it just hit me. Here we are, and you've managed to conceal it all so perfectly. Can't believe I missed it." She winced slightly and took a deep breath. "Yeah, well," she began hesitantly, "that's partly why we're having this intervention, I suppose." "Intervention?" I cut in, the word dripping with sarcasm. "Is that what we're calling this little gathering? Why not something more pleasant? A get-together, perhaps? A come-to-Jesus moment, even?" It slipped out before I could stop myself. I really should have known better. I'm usually more composed than that. "Mike," she said reproachfully, emphasizing my name with the tone people use to stress a two-syllable word. "Oh, please, dear wife," I retorted, matching her tone. "Go ahead. I wouldn't want to derail your agenda." I glanced at the guy sitting beside her and noticed he had one of my beers in front of him. The anger I felt, white-hot and growing, was becoming palpable. "Mike, you admitted it yourself. You had no clue," she continued calmly. "So isn't it fair to say that there was nothing to notice? No signs, no decline in affection or intimacy, right?" She was right. I hadn't noticed. I hadn't been actively looking either. But after 11 years together, you'd think I would have sensed something. But trust can blind you. Still, I pride myself on being observant. My job demands it, and it's not like I took her for granted. Even after all this time, I still surprised her with flowers, whisked her away for weekends, bought little gifts, anything to show her how much she meant to me. Which made this whole situation even more twisted, from my perspective. My mind raced at 320 miles per hour, grappling with questions for which I had no answers. Had I not given her everything? What more could she have wanted? What led her to this? Why? I struggled to rein in my emotions. Giving in to my urge to explode wouldn't bring me any answers, as tempting as it was. I knew enough to realize that eventually I might lose control. But I needed answers first, and this was one way to find some. I wouldn't get all the answers. She would undoubtedly lie about some things. It was inevitable. Despite all, I knew she still loved me and she wouldn't want to hurt me more than necessary, so she'd fabricate details where she thought it necessary. It was only human. But that was the crux of it. I knew she loved me. I was certain of it. Even with evidence suggesting that her love might have been shared, I held on to that certainty. Perhaps I was deceiving myself about the exclusivity implied, but some truths in life you just know, and her love for me was one of them. I gestured with my beer, unable to trust my voice just yet. Christy interpreted this as agreement and continued, speaking in the calmest voice she could muster. "So logically, if I've never given you less than I always have, how does this change things for you? I'm still the same person I've always been. This," she gestured toward the man beside her, "is simply an additional dimension. That's all. Nothing else changes. I still love you and will always be everything to you, just as I've always been. And I want the same from you. Can't you see that? You haven't lost anything here." So that's how it was. She actively wanted me to choose this path. Consider her point of view. It was a trick. She was trying to do to me what I do professionally, to get me to look at things from her point of view, figuratively speaking, to take her place. There was a short silence, then she spoke. "It's not about you, honey. Not at all. You don't lack for anything. You mean a lot to me, and you always will. I just..." "Just what, Christy?" I interrupted, surprised that I hadn't overturned the coffee table in anger by now. "Did you just need more than I could give? Flowers, gifts, weekends, love?" I added sarcastically. "Wasn't it enough for you? Does he have something that I don't?" Christy began to break down. Tears welled up in her eyes. The man next to her bent down. He gave me a hostile look. "Christy," he said in a surprisingly low voice. "Baby, it's okay. Hold on, as we agreed." He hugged her, comforting her. That's when I lost my temper a little bit. I leaned forward and abruptly addressed him. "Hey, buddy. I can call you Rick, right? We're practically a family." With these words, I put my hand on the back of his hand, which was lying on his lap. In one smooth motion, I grabbed his index finger and yanked it sharply up and back. He had no choice but to comply so as not to risk breaking his finger. He had one arm around Christy, and when I pressed harder, bending his finger at an awkward angle, he bent to ease the pain. His movements were limited by Christy's presence. "Mike, please," Christy intervened in a pleading voice. I shot her an evil look before focusing back on the man in front of me. Sensing the tension, she wisely stayed where she was, although her expression hinted at a desire to intervene. Even she wasn't stupid enough to try. "Listen, buddy. This woman is my wife. No matter what you think, she's still my wife." I emphasized the word wife and bent his finger even more. "You're sitting on my couch in my apartment drinking my beer. To be honest, I'm not thrilled with your aspirations to become a white knight, genius. You're here because the lady," Christy winced at the word, "wants you to be here. But I don't want. So close your mouth and don't make a sound, otherwise it will only get worse. Now I'm holding your finger and I've only used one hand. Don't push me anymore, or you'll regret it. Do you understand?" He nodded frantically, releasing his finger, leaned back, removing his hand from Christy's hand and vigorously massaging the injured finger, looking at me with narrowed eyes. I held his gaze. "Not a damn word, jerk. Remember that." I turned my gaze to Christy, who paled noticeably but quickly regained her composure. "It wasn't necessary, Mike. James wouldn't try to hurt you. He's only here for me, to express support, to assure you that he means you no harm." "Really? How thoughtful of him. But he'd better keep quiet. I won't lay a hand on you, but damn it, I could use a target right now, and he's right here. Mike, please try to understand. It wasn't planned. It just happened." "What's wrong, Christy? Did you accidentally fall on his..." I blurted out. She sighed. "No, it's not like that at all. We worked together and everything changed. I'm sorry. I do not know what else to say. I love two men. I love you. I have always loved and always will love, but I love James too. I can't explain it. These are different things. There are similarities, but I take care of both of you in different ways. Please try to understand." I took a sip of beer, thinking about my answer. Putting the bottle on the table, I just said, "Nonsense." She bristled. "No, it's not like that. You know that I love you. You can't doubt that. I've always shown you nothing but respect and love, and you know it. Even when..." She hesitated, then continued. Other things happened, and I tried to make sure that you never felt anything but my complete devotion. That hasn't changed. She looked at me intently, as if urging me to refute it. She's already described the situation as if it was a solved case, using the classic tactics of a leader. When stating something as a fact, others begin to perceive it as reality. Not today, Christy, I thought. The essence of what I do involves vulnerability, uniting people through shared themes and appealing to their sense of justice and importance. While this approach can effectively bring people together, in capable hands, it can also have the opposite effect. I strive not to manipulate in that way. While I understand what brings people together, I also understand how to drive them apart just as easily. It's akin to a massage therapist who knows where to relieve pain, but can also cause discomfort intentionally. I possess a similar capability, though I despise having it. When angered, one can truly devastate someone. In that moment, I was furious. I wanted her to feel my pain, to understand she caused it, and to confront the consequences she faced in the future. I intended to dismantle that future with my words then and there. Reflecting back, I feel a mix of shame for my actions and pride for standing my ground instead of yielding. What I did wasn't noble, but what other choice did I have? I couldn't give her what she wanted because it was the opposite of my desires. There was no middle ground as I saw it. If we had decided together to open our marriage, that would be different. But we hadn't, and I never would. I was committed to one person. Her desires clashed with mine fundamentally, especially evident with the jerk beside her and her behavior, signaling her acceptance of this situation. I had no intention of giving it to her, so according to my professional code, the matter was essentially concluded except for dividing the CD collection. I cocked my head at her. I understood what she cherished. I knew how difficult this was for her, the internal struggle she must have faced. I knew it would haunt her reflection in the mirror after today. Time to inflict some pain. And what if I refuse? What if I reject living like that, Christy? I don't believe in sharing, and neither should you. What about the promises we made? Do they mean nothing? She looked away with a touch of decency. I get your anger, Mike. I would feel the same. But I'm here to help you through this. Look, this has been happening for a while. You've been in the dark. Now you know because I respect you and think you should know. I don't know what will happen next, but I know what I want. I think you can handle this. I think you will. What we share is too precious to let go of. You understand that. We're better together than apart. This, she gestured toward the problem again, doesn't affect us. I don't know how to make you see that. It's like some side job or something. She had no inkling of my anger. She exhibited all the classic signs of someone who had dismissed the possibility of understanding the negative response that was coming, because accepting it would mean acknowledging that she had done something seriously wrong. Most people did this. When confronted with their mistakes or unpleasant actions, they downplayed the reaction to avoid facing the severity of their wrongdoing. No one wants to admit their fault, because it would mean taking action to make amends. I scoffed and said, "You really believe that, huh? How exactly did you think this would work, Christy? How were you planning to soothe my feelings? How were you going to fix this?" She blinked at my words, but to her credit, she composed herself. "I don't know. You would have to tell me. Whatever you wanted." "All right, no problem. Tell that jerk you're done and you want him out of here immediately. And tell him to lose your number." I leaned in, locking eyes with her. "That's what I want, Christy. Can you do that?" She hesitated for a moment, then looked away. "So, nothing then?" I asked coldly. After a moment of silence, I heard the grandfather clock on the wall, a gift from her mother on our 10th anniversary, chime softly, marking the passing minutes. "Mike, why can't you see? Nothing has to change. We're having this conversation here and now because I refuse to deceive you. It's tearing me apart, keeping up appearances. I need to be free. Don't you want that for me? And I respect you too much not to tell you to help you understand. To accept, I finished for her. She nodded, a tear forming at the corner of her eye. How long have we been married, Christy? I asked suddenly. 11 years, she replied, unsure. Right. And in all that time, have I ever given you the impression that I would be okay with this? That I could just accept it? Again, she looked away. Another point to Team Mike. She had underestimated me and my feelings. No, she murmured after a moment, then met my gaze again. But you could. I believe you could. Our life is built on pure love for each other. If you truly loved me, you'd let me have this. Really? Pure love? And this is how you demonstrate it? By falling in love with someone else and being with him. Is that pure love to you? What would pure hate look like then? Killing me first? That's not fair, Mike. I didn't plan for this. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, you've succeeded anyway. I'm sorry. So am I. Doesn't change much, does it? I took another swig of beer. I couldn't taste anything. It was just cold and wet at that moment. I contemplated my next move. I knew this would be difficult for her to confront alone. That's why she brought James along. Without him, she wouldn't have been able to handle it. But she didn't realize the depth of my pain. In fact, even I wasn't fully aware of it at that moment. Christy, how do you think I feel right now? I asked gently. She looked over at the guy beside her, James, who nodded encouragingly. I think you must feel hurt, angry, upset with me for doing this to us, to you. But you don't understand. It's not what you think it is, what you fear. We can make this right. We can work through it. I still love you, and I always will. I need you to know that, if you know nothing else. I love you. I'll always love you. Always be yours. And you'll be mine. We just need to overcome this hurdle, make adjustments, and then we'll be together forever. Remember the lobsters? She was referring to a scene from Friends that we both cherished. That year, we even dressed up as lobsters for Halloween. I don't think you grasp the situation at all. You've torn my heart out. Do you realize that? Everything I believed about us is shattered. Fresh, raw pain poured out of me. No, it's not, Christy interrupted me. That's the point, it's not. I'm still the same person. You're still the same person. This is still the same marriage. There's just another dimension to it. A new aspect. You need to grasp that. Nothing changes. You had to know, that's all. Why is that, Christy? Why did I need to know? Why couldn't you have just kept on sneaking around? I paused, wanting to make a point to her. She seemed taken aback for a moment. Would you really have preferred me to continue cheating? No, that's not what I meant. I'm asking why I needed to know. Because it was destroying me, she said, sounding a bit confused, unsure of where I was heading. I was sneaking around, trying so hard to maintain who I was at home. And it wasn't fair to you. Exactly. So you were sneaking around. Why was that? Why was it tearing you apart? Well, because it was... She trailed off, realizing my point. Wrong? I suggested. She simply looked at me. The reason you were sneaking around is because you knew it was wrong, and you knew I would be furious, upset, hurt, and angry if I found out. You understood the harm and destructiveness of your actions, so you chose to sneak around. You hid your unethical behavior because you knew it was morally incorrect. There was more silence. Then she said, "We just needed to find a way to tell you that would lessen the pain. How's that working out for you so far?" I shot back sarcastically. She remained silent. "But you still have no clue how I feel right now. Everything you've said is just empty words." "Oh, I'm sure this is tough for you. Boo-hoo. Neither of you are sacrificing a damn thing, are you? Just good old Mike. I'm the one who has to accept this. For you, it's a done deal. You've lost nothing. All you want is to have your cake and eat it too. And Mr. Sneaky here, well, I don't know what he's losing. Probably nothing. He gets you without guilt sneaking around. Big deal. He started to say something, but I glared at him, then glanced at his finger and set my beer down, as though preparing for something. He apparently thought better of speaking. Mike, James demands my attention just as much as you do. I'm doing my best here, so please be understanding. I've told him the same thing I'm telling you now. He can't have me like you do. I have 2 men to take care of now, and I'm making sure you're not getting less than you deserve in any way. You're such a fool, Christy. Listen to yourself. Not getting less? That's nonsense. The fact that we're even having this conversation means I am getting less, as you so eloquently put it. I don't have you exclusively anymore, which is not what I agreed to when we got married. And neither did you. The best you can do is drop this guy right now and throw yourself at my mercy. End of story. I don't share. Stop asking. You know better. But you have no clue about how much this hurts me. Imagine if I had an affair. Imagine I was with that cute redhead, the paralegal. Picture that, Christy. Imagine I came home and told you I'd been with her for months, that I love her and want to keep seeing her. I looked at her and realized my words were not sinking in. She was too absorbed in her own situation to grasp the reality of what I was saying. Then she spoke, confirming my suspicions. Well, I wouldn't like it, but I would find a way to accept it. Nonsense. The only reason you say that is because of the situation you want me to accept. Let's be honest here. Oh, sorry. Was I not supposed to ask that? That shut her up. Even she couldn't deny the truth in that statement. You've completely shattered me, Christy. You've destroyed everything between us, don't you see that? I don't care about your excuses that nothing has changed. It has. And there's no denying it. No matter what happens from here on, you've betrayed me irreparably. Always. There's no going back. I can't accept this. And I have to ask you to leave because clearly you want to continue this. Even if you didn't, how could I ever trust you again? You've hidden this from me for who knows how long. If you said, fine, I'm done, what then? How would I know you wouldn't start again with him or someone else? How can I trust you now, Christy? But you won't stop, will you? This is what you want. You just admitted it to me. That really struck a chord. I could see she hadn't considered it that way. That's the thing, people who bargain with the devil never do. You've made your choice, and it's not me, is it? If it were, he would have been gone long ago. That's what I want, but you won't give it to me. Do you have any idea how that feels, Christy? Do you? No, of course not. You've taken everything I had to offer, and now you've taken him too. And now you want to make that choice official. It doesn't work like that. We've already made our choices. You don't get to remake them. I have no clue what my life will be like from now on, but I can tell you this much. I'll never trust another woman again. You've made sure of that, Christy, so thanks for that. Just you. I don't know if I'll ever get past what you've done and what you're trying to force me to accept. I think it's sick. But you're so blinded by wanting it all for a fleeting moment that you truly believe you can have it all, and I'm the one who needs convincing. Well, screw you. Life doesn't work that way. The truth is, you'll never understand the pain you've caused me today, never. Not until someone does the same to you. But that won't happen, will it? Because you'll be too busy getting everything you want. Oh, Mike. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you. Really, I didn't. Please don't feel this way. Tears streamed down her face. How the hell am I supposed to feel, Christy? Whatever you wanted from me. It clearly wasn't enough. Was it? What kind of emotion is that to lay on a man you're supposed to love above all else? Tell me, how am I supposed to feel? I don't even know what I did wrong or what you were missing, and you won't be honest and tell me, will you? You haven't been honest at all. There was only silence. Christy reached out with open arms, hesitating as if to hug me. I raised my hand. No. Thanks. The last thing I want is pity from you. I almost called her something harsh, but I restrained myself. Tears welled up in my eyes without my even realizing it, until I wiped them away. It was a strange mix, battling both intense rage and profound hurt simultaneously. Like wanting to throw someone off a cliff while holding on to them and jumping off yourself. Your mind races, following every thought to its logical end. She needed to grasp the devastation she had caused. Like most people who've done something awful, she avoided facing it, trying to minimize it and find ways to explain it away. She needed to do that because deep down she knew how serious it was and how much damage it had caused, and she didn't want to confront the responsibility. Once you acknowledge it, you're obligated to take action. Admitting fault means you have to repair the damage, and she simply didn't have the means or capability to do that. Some things are irreparable. The more I emphasized this to her, the more she realized her responsibility. Knowing her well, I understood that she had such an idea of herself that she couldn't handle it. She will suffer endlessly, knowing that she caused it herself, and not being able to fix it. Christy sobbed again, and the man next to her moved as if to speak, but changed his mind when I looked at him. After a pause, I asked, "So can I fool around too? Is this part of a grand plan?" Christy looked up at me and frowned. I loved that expression. She wrinkled her nose, and there were wrinkles between her eyebrows. She replied, "Well, I hope not. Ideally, you would be happy that you have all of me. It was always enough before. But I understand that I cannot condemn or refuse. So I wouldn't like it, but I would have to put up with it, with conditions, of course." With conditions? I muttered. This woman was incredible. How could I have been married to her for 11 years and never seen this side of her? What clouded my judgment? Is love really that blind? Was I that forgetful? Well, I didn't fall in love. How are you mean? It was too easy. She frowned again. Right to the point. Now as for C3, C4, and C5, maybe this time I can win her battle. No, I mean, it's different. If you want to be with another woman, I wouldn't like it. But like I said, I can't judge. I understand. No, you just have to be sure, like me, that this is our main relationship. The most important ones. That you're mine and I'm yours. It's like it's always been like this. I grinned at that. Except for the last few months, 6, while you've been with Biffo the clown here? She sighed. It's not like that, Mike. I never stopped loving you. I just explored other options, that's all. I prefer to keep things as they were, thanks, I replied. She brightened at that, thinking I meant I wouldn't find someone else. Great. Well, like I said, between us, nothing changes. I love you just as much as before. That statement infuriated me. It confirmed that our relationship was over. Just as much as before. So, the same amount that led her to another man's bed. And if she did it once, she'd do it again. And what do I get, Christy? A part-time wife? Is that the deal? Some time with me and some with Captain Hook over there? I gestured towards James, who was still fidgeting. It wouldn't be like that, she said, her voice trembling. We thought maybe we could split our time. 2 weeks with you. A few days with James. You're away a lot anyway. You wouldn't miss the time. You'd still get the majority like you do now. You were first. I shook my head and let out a bitter laugh. You're completely nuts, you know that? How did I not see that all these years? She even smiled back and said, Love is blind. Really, I said dryly, with a tone that signaled the end of the discussion. I reconsidered. It amazed me that we were even having this conversation. Yet, it seemed likely to be one of our last, so we had to cover everything now. I was startled to realize this was how I felt, but upon reflection I was firm in that sentiment. And this idiot, I gestured towards James, is okay with all of this? He glanced at her, then at me. There was a hint of a smile again as he hesitated for a moment, waiting for her affirmation before nodding. I turned back to Christy. So, did it just happen? No planning or intention? You just fell in love? I wanted to give her a chance here, and I wasn't disappointed. Yes, you have to believe me. I didn't seek this out. I was happy. I am happy, just even more so. Except for now. It hurts me to hurt you. Isn't it convenient how these things work out? Too bad it's me paying the price and not you, Christy. This isn't easy for me either, Mike. I understand how upset and angry you must be. I know you're better than this. I believe you can handle this. Oh, you believe, do you? You think I can just get over this? She looked away and didn't meet my gaze this time. Would you like to know what I think, Christy? I said, softly. She glanced back at me, worry evident in her eyes. Then she nodded hesitantly. All right then. I think this is nonsense, from beginning to end. I think all this talk of it just happened is nonsense, and right now it's spilling over my shoes. You don't just fall in love, Christy. You know that. It takes effort. Spending time together, seeking each other out, letting each other know you're interested. Inside jokes, subtle touches, personal moments. These are how people fall in love, and you don't do them accidentally. It's a choice. At the very least, it's a choice not to stop yourself. You know it, I know it, and even this guy over here knows it. This incident directly challenged Christy's sense of identity. She strongly believed in her moral integrity and always making the right decisions. To her, and to many others, saying it just happened was simply avoiding responsibility. People use this excuse when they refuse to confront their own guilt for actions they know are wrong. Whether they can control themselves is another issue altogether. Every day, people knowingly engage in actions they recognize as wrong because they lack the moral strength to resist. This temptation is particularly challenging. Individuals often rationalize their actions to ease their conscience, but deep down, most people are aware of what is right and wrong. They often go to great lengths to avoid facing this truth directly. In my mediation practice, I avoid highlighting these situations. Pressuring someone to acknowledge their misconduct rarely leads to a positive outcome. Typically, two scenarios unfold. Either they acknowledge and try to reconcile their behavior, often by inventing increasingly implausible justifications, or they vehemently deny it, cornering themselves logically and emotionally. In the latter case, they may retaliate in harmful ways, resorting to spite and diversion tactics. Ultimately, no one benefits from such confrontations. There are occasions when reaching someone is possible, but it often requires someone they deeply respect, the right words at the right moment, a delicate balance that's easy to misjudge. When someone is deeply in denial, as I observed here, it can feel like trying to shout into a hurricane. In Christy's situation, she understood the wrongdoing and knew my assessment was accurate. However, facing that reality was daunting for her. I attempted to highlight her responsibility for how I felt, with only modest success. That was acceptable, though. Helping someone grasp their actions is typically a gradual process. They must arrive at it themselves. Rarely does someone comprehend it immediately upon being confronted. You may not have intended this, but you certainly didn't prevent it, did you? That's cheating, Christy. Each action was emotional infidelity even before it escalated further. And deep down, you know it. I knew she would ponder this for days. Next steps awaited. So your justification is that I lacked nothing then? Is that it? She simply stared back, beginning to grasp my intent and feeling uneasy. Words wield power when used knowingly. And she recognized my proficiency. I understand. So you never considered that if you had so much love left for Numb Thumb here, it meant you weren't giving it to me? You seem to have set some arbitrary limit on how much love I should receive, with the rest free for you to distribute as you please, is that right? She responded, You can love children and still love your spouse. Did your mother love you any less because there were 6 children? I was taken aback. She was fighting back. I couldn't help but wonder if they had coached each other. Perhaps they had prepared for my inevitable objections. In a way, their planning was impressive. Too bad. Yes, that's true, and since you bring it up, I certainly didn't get my fair share, not at all. And you're well aware of that. But we're not talking about children, are we, Christy? We're talking about a marriage. I practically spat out the last word, and she visibly flinched. Good. I'm so glad you've quantified exactly how much I'm supposed to receive. Maybe you should write a thesis on it. I'm sure plenty of other couples would be interested to know what that magical number is. Just enough, so he doesn't notice any deficit. Is that the idea? More glares. Her face drained around her eyes. She knew very well I was about to confront her now. I asked, What do you think your sister would think about this? Have you considered that at all? Just curious. Christy raised her head defiantly, a clear sign she was sticking to her obstinate path. I don't think they'd approve, but if I could explain to them that I never wanted this to happen, that it just did, that I deserve to be happy and this is my way to it, they'd understand. They want what's best for me, you know. That was true. They did. Although I suspected Christy didn't realize they knew exactly what she was capable of to achieve her goals. Her brother had given me a personal talk on our wedding day about that. He had advised me not to tolerate her nonsense. She burns bright but fast. Stand firm and she'll come around. He also mentioned she had peculiar ideas, but to just laugh them off and she'd catch on eventually. I doubted she'd receive the reception she expected. Yeah, I think you're being optimistic. The moment you explain that you've cheated on me, let's call it what it is. You've been with another man and then lied about it to me. There's no dressing that up. There's nothing you can say or do to change that. And then, I think they'll have something to say about it, don't you? Do you think your brother will approve or understand that, Christy? I gestured with air quotes around approve and understand. She lowered her eyes briefly, and then lifted them again, and said softly, They'll understand. I believe they will. Just like you were sure I'd come to terms with this, right? You're batting 0 for 2 on that score, babe. Not a great track record. She sobbed once and wiped her eyes. But I wasn't ready to back down. You know, even after I ask you to leave, you'll end up with this guy. I glanced at James, who now looked at me with open hostility. Even he understood what I was getting at. Leave? She interjected weakly. After all, you do love him, don't you? You said so yourself. So, when I say go, where will you go? Don't tell me you haven't thought about it. I'm sure you have. You're not naive. You knew there was a chance I wouldn't accept this, and the way it's been presented so far, compromising wasn't an option, so out you'd go. Have you already started moving your things to his place? I'd check, but I'm not keen on getting up. Her voice sounded distant as she spoke. I thought that you might need some time to adjust to the new. Her words faltered briefly, then she shifted gears, sidestepping the question she didn't want to answer. I'm not giving up. Even if you ask me to leave, you belong to me and I belong to you. I'll always be here. You know that. Her tactics were becoming more intriguing. She was determined to engage me on my own terms, appealing to my emotional ties. She knew I excelled in finding solutions in my professional life, and she believed she was offering the best solution for us now. So your plan was to be with a man who knowingly pursues another man's wife. a man who shows no regard for others' relationships. Is that the standard you're settling for these days? Wow. Her words struck a nerve, and I caught her stealing a glance at James, who returned a reassuring smile, silently urging me not to take her words too seriously. "Babe, he began. But I cut him off as I leaned forward. With as much menace as I could muster, speaking in a hushed tone, I warned, "Last chance, James, or they'll start calling you Jimmy One Ball. Understand? And he's tying himself to you," I went on. "A proven cheater. Once a cheater, always a cheater, right? You two deserve each other, that much is certain. It can be exciting at first, a lot of guilt-free intimacy, at least on your part. I doubt he ever felt guilty. But what happens when the novelty wears off? It always does. What happens when he's late from work? Or you are? You both know each other's capabilities now. How will that play out? Who will trust whom, I wonder?" Christy glanced at James, who shook his head with a weak smile, clearly dismissing my words. But the damage was done. Christy prided herself on her ability to judge people and on her own ethics. Tonight, both had taken a hit, and she was sharp enough to recognize the truth in what I said. And worse, now that it was out there, it couldn't simply be ignored. In moments of emotional intensity like this, it would inevitably resurface as the first thought. In that moment, their relationship was irreparably tainted before it even began. The seed of suspicion had been planted and wouldn't go away. In a sense, their entire relationship was founded on that deception, an uncomfortable truth that was now glaringly apparent to her thanks to my intervention. Christy turned to me, her eyes widening. She understood my words, and I could tell they had struck a chord. It was only superficial for now, but I knew it would sink in deeper with time. She had deceived me, taking advantage of my trust. She knew she could never do the same with him, not in the same way, and my words had underscored that fact. Good. Another blow inflicted. I still wanted my revenge. Time to deliver the final blow, then. I took another sip of beer, finishing the can this time. I even burped, casually timed for effect. "But you know what really hits home?" I continued, looking at her tearful face. Despite the supposed purpose of this conversation, to explain the new reality to me, she remained mostly silent. "You have a truly malicious streak deep inside you." That hit close to home as well. No matter what Christy thought of herself, she held a strong conviction that she was a fundamentally good person. She had her sayings about it, how some individuals were good people who simply made a mistake, how hardly anyone was inherently evil. Most people found themselves in tough situations and saw only one way out, or circumstances forced their hand. I hadn't really pondered it deeply until recently, but I'd come to realize that Christy was a compassionate liberal at heart. She was the type who never shifted blame onto others. Now I identify as a liberal too. I believe in universal health care, in looking after all sectors of society and the like. However, I also uphold personal accountability. You may have reasons for your actions, and I may empathize with those reasons, but in my view, that doesn't absolve you from the responsibility of your actions. You might have faced hardships or been mistreated, but that doesn't justify taking a gun into a bar and shooting innocent people. Nothing does. You made the choice, for whatever reasons, and those people are just as dead now as they were moments ago. Understanding your motives doesn't magically bring those people back to life. She firmly believed she was a good person who might occasionally do something wrong, but that was acceptable because she'd regret it deeply afterward. When someone you deeply care about says such things to you, even though you don't want to believe them, a part of you recognizes their truth. Despite your defenses, their words penetrate your consciousness. I was someone she trusted immensely, yet I labeled her as evil, and I meant it. By exposing her self-deception, I gave her reason to doubt herself, which was incredibly painful, especially coming from someone she valued and trusted. I hoped she would disregard my vested interest in saying those words. I counted on her believing them, knowing the immense power of self-affirmation. All right then. It was time to make her truly suffer. The truth is, Christy, every time you see yourself in the mirror from now on, you'll remember today. What you've said, what you've done, the actions you've taken, the pain and personal destruction you've caused, all because you didn't intend to fall in love. Well, I refuse to accept that excuse. You made a conscious choice. Why, I can't begin to fathom, and I'm not sure you know either. But that doesn't matter now. You did it, and this is the outcome. I'm going to ask you to leave soon, and if you're smart, you'll go. I've never hit a woman before, and despite everything, I care for you deeply. But if you stay, I might not be able to control myself, especially with that jerk standing there. So take this with you. You've shown yourself to be a malicious person. Everything you've done here is sheer malice. Know that our friends and your family will see it too. I can explain it to them just as you've tried to explain it to me. Think about that. Consider the consequences of your affair. You've destroyed the one thing in your life you could rely on, and there's no one else to blame but yourself. You are undeniably a deeply flawed person, one of the worst kinds, inflicting harm on others and then trying to diminish your own responsibility by downplaying the damage. You're the sort of person who I hope ends up alone and suffering. If I were you, I'd seek professional help. It's too late now, but I'd want to understand why so I don't repeat this mistake. So go ahead, leave with your habitual cheater, and have a wonderful life, always wondering where the other is. Meanwhile, I'll be here, drowning my sorrows and wondering what I could have done differently. I hope the thrill was worth all you've lost. Now, please, just go. I sat there staring at her, and she stared back. She was on the verge of speaking, hesitated, then began, "This is my house too." I took off. I stood up, trying to look as threatening as possible, and yelled, "Get the hell out!" I threw an empty beer can at the wall, and it clattered across the floor. It didn't have quite the effect I was hoping for, but I was too furious to pay attention to it. She crumpled, and James rose to his feet, glancing at my enraged expression. He turned away, scooping up a visibly frightened Christy in his arms, and rushing her toward the door. "Wait," I said, with one final act in mind. It struck me in that very moment, a fitting conclusion to the evening. Approaching her, she shrank back. I seized her left hand and pried her clenched fist open, swiftly removing both her engagement and wedding rings before she could resist. Stepping back, I examined the rings briefly. Then, removing my own ring, I clenched all three in my fist and said, "Wait right here." I strode to the bathroom next to the front door, just off the kitchen, and pushed the door open. Glancing back at her pale face, I dropped all three rings into the toilet bowl, and without looking, flushed it. "Seems appropriate. You flushed our marriage down the drain, so down go the rings too." I foresaw the pain it would cause. These rings meant a lot to her. She devoted 3 months to finding the perfect ones, making them on the model of her late father's ring. I didn't feel happy about what I was doing, but it had a symbolic meaning. At that moment, all I wanted to do was hurt. I'm not proud of it now, but I have to honestly admit my feelings at that moment. She whimpered at my actions, whispering softly, No, I didn't mean that." "And one more thing," I interrupted, and saying something, I swung and hit James right in the face. I put everything I had into the punch. It crashed to the floor. Christy glanced at him quickly, then back at me. I shook my aching hand and frowned at her. "You can go now. I'll change the locks tomorrow. Wait for the documents." It was all over. It was over between us. She knew it and I knew it. She wouldn't be able to look at herself in the mirror after witnessing it. She couldn't look her friends in the eye without shame, haunted by today's events. Everything that led to this. What she did to us. To the man she thought she was. And at that moment, I didn't feel any sympathy. I was hurt, betrayed, humiliated, and damn it, I was furious and determined to get revenge. I considered that she might resort to extreme measures, but at that moment, I regret to admit I was indifferent. It's not the appropriate response, but I was so devastated that I couldn't muster any concern. It paints an unflattering picture of me, but as I've mentioned, I'm not the easiest person to live with, especially in moments like these. She knelt beside him, fussing, and I grabbed him roughly by his hair. Then I opened the condo door, wordlessly pushed him out, leaving blood on the hardwood floor. Christy followed, shocked. After they were outside, I retreated indoors and slammed the door in their faces. I stood there, trembling for a moment, then returned to the living room to grab the bottle of peach-flavored vodka from the kitchen counter. I knew my words had been harsh, but I had no intention of drinking myself into oblivion, though a few hefty swallows seemed necessary to calm my nerves. Life was about triumph, and I refused to be a victim, even when I felt like one. I would simply have to find a way forward. Tomorrow is another day.